29. Dawn. It's been almost a full 24 hours since I woke up in the secret lair of Mrs. Yvonne Reed. And now, after a little healing, a little resting, and a lot of planning, I lie on an abandoned rooftop with binoculars raised, watching the activity in the Amber City Botanical Gardens below. I'm wearing fresh clothes, a navy blue suit and a coat with matching hat and tie. I have a nice supply of new equipment, too, thanks to Yvonne's resources. But out of everything, it's the hat for which I'm most grateful. It's raining, of course, though not bad, and it feels good to have my bald head covered again. I scan the scene with my binoculars. The botanical gardens are a staple of high society on Jannix, often used for charity benefits and swanky parties. 1,000 species of plant life from across the star system flourish throughout the courtyard. Statues and fountains sit tucked between tropical plants like the ruins of some lost jungle civilization. Beneath solar lamps, flowers of every color and intermediate pigment bloom large and small. Most of the gardens are under cover of transparent domes, but there is an open-air section. That's where the guests in attendance currently are. And the casket. Black-clad funeral directors escort ladies and gentlemen of importance, family, friends, and the Amber City elite, to tables and seats amid flowers and ferns. They wear coats and hats against the rain. At center stage, upon a raised dais, sits Nathan Harlan's gold-plated casket. Above it is an overhanging pulpit shrouded by a silk curtain, normally used as a booth for the Master of Ceremonies. Today, it will be Rutherford Harlan's private box. A sliver of light is cresting the horizon through a break in the rain clouds, turning the sky blue. It's been 6 days since Rutherford Harlan hired me to hunt down his son's murderer, and with the rise of this son, I plan to deliver.
"You think they'll really risk it, out in the open like this?"
Yvonne says. I lower the binoculars to look at her. She's ducked beside me, watching through her own binoculars and wearing that hard-shell riding suit. Subtlety has never been the Blue Wreath's strong suit, I answer. They are not easily deterred. Nice thing about that, though, is that it also makes them predictable.
"In front of all these people," Yvonne mumbles. "They're certainly daring."
Far from it, I say. They've got everything to gain and nothing to lose, but they're not counting on us.
"You've got guts, Jack."
Don't let it fool you. I don't have much to lose either. I raise the binoculars back up to scan the courtyard. 2 cops in dress blues and caps flank the casket. They are the only noticeable security, but several members of Harlan's personal security force have taken strategic positions throughout the courtyard disguised as guests. It's an admirable effort, but against the mob, it won't be enough. Think anyone's noticed yet that you aren't there?
"Noticed, sure," says Yvonne. "Care? I doubt it. I'm the overlooked child, remember?"
I start to say something, but then I spot shadows moving behind the pulpit curtain. "Here he comes," I say. "Get ready." A silhouette appears behind the curtain, the old man in the wheelchair, rolling up to take his place overseeing the ceremonies. I zoom out, trying to get a view of the entirety of the courtyard. Everyone in attendance stands out of respect for Rutherford Harlan. "You watch the box," I say. "I'll watch the crowd." Here comes the director. Striding to the front of the dais is a man in a black suit. He raises his hands, encouraging the crowd to sit back down so the ceremony may commence. As the guests settle into their seats, the director starts speaking. From this distance, it's impossible to know what he's saying, but it doesn't matter. I'm too busy scanning the crowd. I spot a few familiar faces, city delegates and local public figures of some importance, security in suits trying to look casual, but still no sign of Wilmer O'Hara or his cohort, Bot Nathan. The funeral director steps back, then pauses strangely, looking over his shoulder. "Jack!" cries Yvonne. People start throwing themselves to the ground in terror as I swing my binoculars away for a view of the pulpit. The shadowed figure is swaying crazily in his chair. Bullets are ripping holes through the silk shroud. The shadow within jerks some more and falls backward out of its chair. I zoom out, trying to see everything at once. In the half-light of dawn, I see guests scattering, mouths agape with inaudible screams. The terrified funeral director is on the ground with hands over his head. Cops and private security race toward the pulpit with sidearms drawn. Where the hell did it come from?
I'm getting a call from Hennessy,
Yvonne says. I turn to look at her. She's got her finger pressed to her ear, listening to a comm feed through an earpiece.
Downward trajectory. Came from the southwest.
As I thought. They fired down into the open air portion of the gardens, but I've underestimated their timing. Didn't think they'd take their shot so quickly. I point the binoculars to the southwest. Depending on the model of weapon used and the shooter's skill, it could have been a real long shot. There are too many buildings to check them all, but in this congested part of town, there are only so many places with a clear shot. And for it to have come from the southwest, he'd have to be pretty high up. I zoom in on a building, a tall, narrow skyscraper southwest of the gardens with a dozen old satellite bowls on top of it. I've begun scanning for a sniper among the satellites when a bit of movement prompts me to redirect my focus. Not on the rooftop, but on a window on one of the uppermost floors. With my binoculars zoomed in as far as they will go, I can barely hold my hand steady enough to see the window clearly. Still, I'm able to see it before it disappears. A shadowed figure pulling a high-powered rifle off of a tripod mount and back into an open window. Got him, I growl. Yvonne's up and running before my aching body can even get to its feet. She sprints to the rear of the roof and hops into the seat of her skybike. The headlamps come on as she revs the engine.
Hurry up, old man,
she yells. Smart-mouthed little. She's putting on her helmet as I climb into the rear seat. The thing's a souped-up old pre-war model that would make a collector drool. I'm hardly even settled in when she kicks the anti-grav boosters and we rocket off the roof into the sky. I cling on for dear life to the handholds as the wind whips by. The tails of my new coat billow over the back of the bike. It's all I can do not to look down. Came from one of the top windows. In that building with the old satellite station, I shout at Yvonne over the roar of the wind. We can find a way in from the roof. She nods an affirmative and jams the accelerator, and though it seems impossible, our velocity increases. The rain smacks my face like needles, and the force of several gravities coming at me from different directions threatens to pull me clean out of my seat. As we approach the building, I keep a sharp eye on the window. I make a mental note of the location, 3 stories down and 5 from the northeast corner. Yvonne reduces the throttle to an idle and lets the bike drift in a hover behind one of the larger satellite bowls. Below and behind us, I can hear the sirens of police cruisers zooming into the gardens. This is where we part ways, I say. Yvonne shakes her head.
You've hardly recovered from last time. You can't go in by yourself.
I need you to head below, I say. To ground level. If I spook him towards you, or if he's already fast on his way down, our only chance is for you to head him off. I detach Albright's shotgun from its cargo mount behind me, and I swing my leg over, getting ready to hop down to the rooftop. If I need any backup, I'll call, I tell her. If you don't hear from me one way or the other in 20 minutes, get out of here. Without waiting for a response, I slide from the seat and drop to the rooftop. I land in a crouch with Albright's shotgun tight in my hands. I look up at Yvonne on her bike. I can't see her face behind the helmet's tinted visor, but it's not hard to discern from her body language her hesitance and concern. In the end, she raises a hand in salute, slides the back into neutral, directs it over the edge of the building, and disappears in the silent dive that makes my stomach lurch just to watch it. I sigh, thankful that she agreed to leave. I've dragged her further into this thing than I should have, and I won't do it anymore. Rutherford's already lost a son. He doesn't need to lose a daughter. I crack open Albright's shotgun and check the barrels. The rain is letting up, and I can feel the almost forgotten sensation of sunlight on my neck. I prop the butt of the shotgun against my hip and keep my finger on the trigger as I look for a door down into the building. The satellites look rusty and unattended, probably a decommissioned uplink station used for extraplanetary data transfers before the FTL net. I peek down a row of them as I move toward the center of the building, keeping a watchful eye on my surroundings. There, I find what I'm looking for. A doorway leading down into the building. It will be locked, but that's nothing a little elbow grease can't fix. I take a quick look over my shoulder. The simple act of checking my 6 saves my life. The portly body of Bot Nathan is lunging at me from behind. I see his arm coming just in time to avoid it. He swings at me in a downward lumberjack chop, the gleaming blade of a large knife clutched in his hand. I jump back, and his arm connects with the satellite bowl beside me instead. The knife in his hand punch a hole through the bowl like it was made of paper. I aim the shotgun. He's even faster than I remember. He lowers his body and charges, slamming into me. I pull the trigger, but my aim has been knocked skyward. Accelerated scatter shots fire wildly off target, and suddenly I'm flat on my aching back. Albright's shotgun is wrenched from my grasp and flung across the rooftop. Pain erupts in my chest, and I bite down so hard I probably crack enamel. Bot Nathan's foot is planted against my ribcage, pinning me to the ground. I grab at his ankle, trying to force him off of me, but it's of course impossible. He's got the strength of a machine and the weight of one, too. It's like trying to tear off a car bumper. Looking up, I see I'm not the only one who's undergone some half-hearted repairs since our last meeting. He still wears the same bullet-shredded black suit, but no fool would mistake this monster for a man anymore. He's been given a new arm, one that makes no attempt to bear any biological resemblance. It's bare metal like the skeletal neck of a crane, too long for his body and wielding a triangular three-fingered claw on the end. As for his face, the repairs are minimal. The damaged areas have been patched. He's still missing his whole lower jaw. I can see scorch marks from where I pushed the live wires into him. The morning light reflects sharply off the blade of the very large knife in his human-looking hand. The top and only half of his mouth lifts up strangely in the emulation of a smile. From the half-mutilated voice box somewhere in his mechanical neck, a robotic voice growls, "Jack the Knife." He could have just shot me, or crushed me like a bug, or flung me off the roof, or picked me up with one hand and blasted me at close range half a dozen times, like he did to Nathan Harland. But it seems that even bots carry some notion of irony. Bot Nathan raises the knife. 30. My ribs feel like they're about to pop beneath the machine man's weight, but my hands are free at my sides. As Bot Nathan winds up for the death strike, I draw the particle pistol strapped to my calf. I fire twice before he can react. 2 red-hot blasts of concentrated radiation streak into him. The first hits his wrist and burns straight through it. I see the glint of the knife pinwheeling through the air, leaving him brandishing nothing but a handless forearm. The second blast burns a hole through his neck. He kicks my weapon hand before I can fire a third shot, and it's like getting hit with a sledgehammer. As the pistol flies from my grasp, I'm shouting in agony. He's just broken the fingers of my good hand. All of them. At once. He bends down to grab me, but his head flops unnaturally to the side. The damaged half of his neck is a crater of glowing, superheated metal. He takes an awkward step, like a man fighting dizziness, and his head hangs like a flower on a broken stalk. His sideways step frees me from his weight. I scramble to get to my feet, trying to remember where the shotgun went. But before I can make more than a single step, the claws of his extra-long arm grab my coat, pull upward, and toss me. It's my second experience being unwillingly airborne in a relatively short period of time. For a frightening moment, I think he may have actually tossed me all the way over the side of the building. My arms flail in a pathetic attempt to adjust my landing, but little can be done. Instead of going over the edge, I land sickeningly flat on my back, right in the center of a satellite bowl. The impact is gut-wrenching. My head strikes hard against the bowl, and stars flash across my eyes. The wind is knocked out of me. My lungs heave and groan with the effort of drawing breath. High above, the sky is clearing, turning a brighter and brighter shade of blue with the dawn. And what do you know? It's not even raining anymore. But dark clouds are still swirling before my eyes, darkening the dawn back into dusk, eating away at my vision, swirling, suffocating all consciousness. I promise I'll take care of you.
I know you will, Jack.
Blinking rapidly to clear the blackness, I hear Bot Nathan coming for me. The clanking of strangely illogical steps, like a drunk on a massive bender. Weird animal sounds are being emitted from his robotic voice emulator. Seems he's not sure where I landed. I move my legs, testing to see if they still function. Success. Next, I test my arms. I slide them against the bowl. My hand brushes up against something that feels like cold, human flesh. I raise my head to look at it. It's not human flesh, but I'll admit it's a convincing copy. Bot Nathan's dismembered hand is lying beside me in the satellite bowl, and still clutched in its dead, human-like fingers is the knife. As quietly as I can, I pick up the dismembered hand and use my unbroken fingers to peel the robotic digits away from the knife handle. A squealing, metallic screech. I look up and see one of the smaller satellites being pushed clean off its mounts, just a few yards from me. Getting warmer. I freeze in place. Just over the lip of the bowl, I can see at the top of a sideways hanging, human-like head moving in this direction. He's right in front of me, though he doesn't know it yet. I pull the knife free. I see the head turn to the side, and I take my chance. I haul back and toss Bot Nathan's disembodied hand in a neat arc forward and high above him. It lands in the pit of a satellite bowl behind him with a nice, rich gong. Bot Nathan wheels toward the sound. I pounce. Until I try, I'm not even sure my body is capable of doing what I'm about to do. It's far from graceful, but I manage to jump over the side of the satellite. The bot that killed Nathan Harland is looking the wrong way at the wrong moment. I hit him in the back and latch on with all my might. He roars with a robotic objection, flailing his arms in an attempt to throw me off. I wrap my arm around the top of his flopping head and wrench backward until his synthetic eyes are looking up at me. Jack, he wails. That's right, I say. Jack the knife. I plunge the blade into the remains of his robotic neck to the squeal of metal on metal. Sparks fly. Electricity cooks my fingers. He's still trying to grab me with his claws. I pull sideways, hard, wrenching the knife with all my might across his metal throat. The knife loosens his neck. Brute force does the rest. Pulling his head off is like harvesting a stubborn radish. The tail of a severed, mechanical spinal cord trails out with it, spilling gears and wires of dislodged robotic viscera. A crackle of electrical energy. Lubricant fountains from the neck. The body takes a step, then drops to its knees. I step back. There's a whirring and hissing of dying machinery, and for a moment I think the body is going to explode. Instead, it just falls forward and crashes to the ground. 31. I stand there, holding Bot Nathan's head by a fistful of hair, feeling oddly like a child with a broken toy. I watch the body for signs of life, but it doesn't move. For a few seconds, some handicapped processing power remains active in the head. Brown eyes, manufactured to look so much like Rutherford's and Yvonne's, glare at me. The half-mouth tries to speak to me. I drop the head. It whines on the ground with angry, meaningless syllables. Then even this fades away. Still, only after some experimental kicks am I satisfied that Bot Nathan is really dead for good. The sun is well over the horizon by now, and the skies are clear and wonderful. I'm tempted to call Yvonne, to have her come and pick me up so we can hightail it out of here and leave this whole business behind me. I got the killer, after all. Mission accomplished. My work is done. But I still need the rifle that was fired from the window. I'm currently wanted by the police for Albright's murder, and what with it being little Wilmer's word against mine. My only chance of clearing my name is being thorough, documenting every piece of this puzzle. I head toward the doorway, a small, shed-like structure set against the north wall of the building, swinging wide to retrace my steps in search of a weapon, either my kicked particle pistol or Albright's shotgun. I'm still carrying Bot Nathan's knife in my uninjured hand, but I'll feel better with something a little more substantial. I'm trying to ignore how injured I really am, but it's all I can do just to put one foot in front of the other. My back hurts. My ribs hurt. My knees hurt. The broken fingers of my good hand are swollen, crooked, painful. What I wouldn't give to be a couple years younger right about now. I spot Albright's shotgun. I'm about to pick it up when my datapad rings. It's an effort just to pull it from my jacket pocket. I check the display, see that it's Yvonne. Zip! A snap of sparks. The top half of my datapad explodes. I drop the rest in surprise. Hands up! I turn toward the voice. Zip! A puff of dust erupts as a hole is blown in the ground beside Albright's shotgun, dangerously close to my left foot. I still don't put my hands up. I won't give him the satisfaction. Little Wilmer O'Hara is about 10 yards away, standing on top of the shed-like structure where the building stairway meets the roof. Propped in his arms is a large, high-powered rifle. His head is cocked to the side, watching me through the scope. His trigger finger sticks out from a wad of bandages wrapping the wrist I broke in the factory. "Good morning," I say. Wilmer works the bolt, feeding the next slug into the chamber. "Hands up," I said. "Nah, no point," I say. "If you were just going to shoot me, you'd have shot me in the back just now, like you did your partner." "I'm not fooling around, Tarelli," he says. "Drop the knife and put your hands up." "You can't shoot me, can you, Wilmer? Because if my body turns up with bullets in it matching the ones used to try to kill Rutherford Harland, well, people are going to get very suspicious." Wilmer tips his head out from behind the scope to look at me with both eyes. "What do you mean, tried?" "You Blue Wreath boys are all the same," I say. "Always too eager to pull the trigger. Guess it never occurred to you that it might be a decoy behind that curtain." Wilmer puts his eyes to the scope again. Behind it, his cheeks turn red. "Aw, what's the matter, Willie? Did I ruin your game?" "Don't think I won't shoot you anyway," Wilmer says. "I'll figure out some way to explain it. See, the joke's on you, Seamus. We'll get the old man eventually. As for you, here's the way the story's gonna go. Rutherford hired Jack the Knife, the wife-killer cop who walked, to try to catch his son's killer. But a loose cannon like the knife. Turns out, his same old history of violence tragically repeated itself. Not only did the knife shoot Detective Albright when he got in his way, but with the cops bearing down on him, he tried to erase his connection to the case entirely. He got himself a high-powered rifle, climbed up to a sniper's roost, and tried to kill Rutherford." His lips peel back in a smile. "Then he jumped." "A little melodramatic," I say. "Not to mention it's full of holes." "And I'll be the first one to point that out," he replies. "May even launch a full investigation into the matter in honor of my fallen partner. People already think you killed your wife. The public can't resist a recurring villain." I turn slightly, taking in my surroundings. The shed-like structure Wilmer stands on is set along the edge of the roof, and I'm near the corner, only a few steps from the precipice of a 200-story drop. "Go on, Seamus," hisses Wilmer. Zip! Another puff of dust inches from my toes. He's smiling wide as ever as he works another slug into the chamber. "Jump!" 32. I look at Wilmer, look at his rifle. I'm only about 10 yards away from him, and at close range, it gets tough to keep a moving target within a high-powered scope like that. But walking is difficult enough for me at the moment. No way I could move fast enough to charge him without getting a new hole to breathe from. I could try, might get lucky, but it's too desperate. Not my style. Mentally, I'm trying to count the minutes since I arrived on the rooftop. Some backup would be nice, but if Yvonne flies up here unaware of the danger, Wilmer's going to have a clear shot at blowing her out of the sky. "I'm losing my patience, Jack," Wilmer shouts. "Take a walk!" By the tone in his voice, I know he isn't bluffing. With each second, the truth is no doubt sinking in his brain. The reality of how bad his situation has become. He doesn't have a handle on things anymore. How's he going to get out of here today? And when he does, how's he going to explain all this to the cops? Forget the police. What's the Blue Wreath going to do to him if they decide their inside man is no longer an asset and has become a liability? It's all spiraled beyond his control, and he's getting nervous. And nervous at the trigger of a gun is more dangerous than mean or angry any day of the week. I'm still holding the knife. I squeeze its handle, wishing it was something more useful. Ahead of me, I notice something on the ground. A little flake of yellow hovering over the rooftop like a fairy. It's the opposite of a shadow, a reflection of morning sunlight, caught and concentrated into a tiny square of light. The reflection of a blade. I look up at Wilmer. In my peripheral vision, I experiment with the reflected sunlight, tipping the knife back and forth ever so slightly. The yellow flake follows my movements around on the ground between us. Only one of us is leaving this rooftop alive, I say, stalling for time. I can see that now. But before that happens, maybe you'll answer a question for me, one homicide detective to another.
Try your luck if you want, says Wilmer. But I suggest you walk while you talk. Go for that gun, and I'll blow your brains out.
I take a step backward, stepping over Albright's shotgun to make him happy. You said a moment ago that people think I killed my wife. I'm assuming you would have worded that differently if you thought I was a wife killer. So my question is, are you just giving me the benefit of the doubt, Wilmer? Or do you know something? I tip the knife upward slightly, letting the visible beam crawl up Wilmer's pant leg toward his upper body. Behind the scope, he shows all his teeth.
Being a blue wreath boy does have its advantages, he says. Sure, I know the truth. In a funny sort of way, this all fits together.
I tilt the knife even further upward, going slowly so as not to alert him. The light is on his chest now.
Yeah,
says Wilmer.
Nash would get a real kick out of this.
My heart nearly stops. Nash, I say. Who is Nash?
Tacitus Nash, says Wilmer. Why, he's...
Sirens in the distance, getting closer. Wilmer's smile fades to a look of worry, and he fires at my feet again. Zip.
Now, Jack,
he says. Who is Tacitus Nash? I start to say, but he works another round into the chamber and shoots again. Zip. The ping of a ricochet.
Jump,
he yells. Zip. The bullet hits the ground near my feet. The sirens are getting closer. Reload.
Now,
he snarls through gritted teeth. Zip. This time, I feel the slug tear through my shoe. Reload. He shifts the rifle up. Its barrel quivers with his nerves. It's aimed right at my face. He screams,
"Do it!"
Fine, I say. I tilt the knife. The beam of light lands squarely within the glass circle at the end of his scope. Wilmer squeals like a woman, yanking his head away from the scope involuntarily. To the naked eye, that little reflection would be an annoyance. Through super magnification, it's got to hurt. Wilmer fires in desperation. The bullet hits me in the shoulder, spraying blood. My body spins slightly from the punch of impact, but I manage to remain standing. Thankfully, adrenaline dulls the initial pain. I drop the knife. It's too painful to move, so I just wedge my foot under Albright's double barrel and kick upward. I catch the shotgun in my good hand. Wilmer is still working the bolt for another shot, blinking frantically against the blindness in his good eye, as I pull the trigger and fire from the hip. The blast hits Wilmer with the force of a low-flying airship. He makes a strange little noise as it lifts him an inch off his feet. The rifle falls out of his hands as he goes backward over the edge of the shed, tumbles, and keeps going over the side of the building. I hear him yelling long enough to know that the shotgun blast didn't kill him outright. It's a long fall to the street below. Plenty of time for him to think about the totality of his failure. I drop the shotgun. It lands with a clatter beside the knife. Searing hot pain is pulsing in my shoulder, and my coat sleeve is soaked and dripping into a widening, shockingly large puddle on the rooftop in front of me. Sirens are wailing, close and getting closer. Carefully, oh so carefully, I get down on my knees and do my best to put my hands behind my head, and I wait for the cops to arrive. I've lost my hat again in all the commotion. The sun is warm on my bare head. 33. The viewport from Rutherford Harlan's observatory is no less impressive in full daylight. Across a blue, cloudless sky, the sun shines over the skyline. I lean over the balcony railing, my broken fingers splinted and wrapped, my arm done up in a sling. My good hand clutches a cane. I don't like having to use it. It makes me feel like an old man. Beside me, Rutherford is quiet. I can't help but feel partially responsible, given all he's been forced to contend with over the past 48 hours. He'd been hesitant at first about my plan to stage his public appearance and use Hennessy as bait to catch the killer. I think the idea of his son's funeral, phony or not, becoming a scene of violence gave him trepidation. But oh, how he enjoyed the idea of tricking all those high society types into thinking he was dead for a few hours. As far as Harlan knows, Yvonne had no part in any of it. She asked me not to out her as Royal Evening, and it was a request I felt obliged to honor, given that she saved my life. Twice, really. But her other request, that I keep my mouth shut about Nathan and let the old man go on believing the best of his son, that I could not do. It was a question of professional ethics. In the end, I had to remind myself of what Rutherford hired me for in the first place, to find the truth. I can leave out certain elements of the truth that I found, but I refused to deceive him. I had to tell him what his son had really been doing, no matter how bad it hurt. I take a sidelong glance at Rutherford hunched over in his chair beside me. He initially seemed appreciative of my honesty, but I can tell the news isn't sitting right with him. I just hope he can someday find it in his heart to forgive Nathan.
I trust you're satisfied with your bonus,
Harlan says suddenly. You know you didn't have to do that, I say.
Nonsense. You deserve more, probably. But I didn't get to be where I am today by being frivolous with money. Tell me, was he very convincing? The double, I mean.
I think I know what he's really asking. Would the plan have worked? Could Bot Nathan have really fooled security, gotten up here, and killed him? And could it be attempted again? Tricked me at first, I answer. But of course, I never knew the real Nathan. I have a feeling you wouldn't have been fooled for a second. But a second, I know, is all it would have taken. Steady, measured footfalls echo through the observatory as a straight-backed little man enters. He walks up the balcony with a silver platter balanced on one hand. He arrives before us and bows, presenting the tray. There are 2 glasses on it. It's the expensive scotch from the first night. Delicious stuff, really. Rutherford takes one of the glasses. I reach for the other. My fingers hover over the rim for a moment. Then I pull my hand back and clear my dry throat. None for me, thanks.
Yes, sir,
says Hennessy. He looks at me. No, through me, with those lifelike Bot eyes. Are you recovering all right, Hennessy? I ask.
All systems fully functional, sir, Hennessy says. In fact, I personally conducted all the necessary repairs.
A DIY job, eh? Well, you made a perfect stand-in for your boss. I hope you didn't get hurt too badly.
The placement of the would-be assassin's gunshots, while almost certainly deadly to a human, resulted in only minimal damage to my body. Any systems with temporarily impaired functionality were quickly rerouted to other processing centers, maintaining operation with nearly 100% effectiveness. Much harm can befall a bot before its functionality becomes jeopardized.
You're telling me, I say. I'm reminded just how lucky it is that I managed to take Bot Nathan out. His remains were about the only thing that kept the police from tossing me behind bars, hesitant as they were to believe the story about Wilmer killing Albright. It didn't take long for the pieces to start falling into place. No doubt they'll be calling to ask me some more serious questions before long, but that's all right by me. I'm just thankful to have had my name removed from the most wanted list. By your count, Jack, says Rutherford as Hennessy bows and excuses himself.
How many died in this chain of events?
I exhale long and slowly, trying not to forget anybody as I rattle them off. Well, Nathan was killed by the bot. 4 Blue Wreath hitmen tried to take me out when I took an interest in the case, and only one lived to tell about it. A cab driver was killed in the crossfire during another attempt to take me out. I'm assuming it was the bot that time, having followed me after my return visit to the crime scene. But I also learned that an employee of a friend of mine was killed. A doorman, beaten to death shortly after I visited him. In hindsight, I think that was the bot too, which means he had been following me even longer than I thought. It was either to send a message, or the bot was trying to get information about me. I've spoken to my friend since, and he's set up shop in a new part of town, trying to leave his past life behind. The cabbie is the one I feel most badly about, but Detective John Luke Albright is a close second. He didn't like me much at first, but I wouldn't have either in his place. He was a good man, just doing his job. When we entered that factory to search for Nathan, supposedly, John Luke was shot in the back by his partner, Wilmer O'Hara, who'd been working for the mob all along. For that, I made sure to take care of Wilmer personally. He's the one who tried to take you out at your son's memorial service, and he brought Nathan along with him for protection. They found Wilmer's body in the street after a very long fall, so that brings the total to 8 men. I guess 9, if you count Nathan. I don't, Rutherford snaps. Well, I do, I say. He was the hardest one. Despite everything, Rutherford's mustache twitches in amusement. I'm just glad you didn't end up on that list, Mr. Harland, I tell him. Blue Wreath lost this time, but they don't give up easily. I suggest you hire some extra security around here. Lie low, even lower than before. The funny thing is, you and I almost surely wouldn't be talking right now if not for a certain phone call. Ah, yes, says Rutherford, leaning back in his chair thoughtfully. The anonymous tip that led the police to my boy. You mean you never found out who made the call? Not yet, but when I get to the bottom of it, Rutherford waves a dismissive hand. I have other people I can ask to look into that. I'm sure it has something to do with the internal politics of this Blue Wreath syndicate. I just cannot believe they would go to such lengths. Killing my family just to get to me. I swallow hard. I know the feeling. Yes. I have been thinking. There's something else I would like you to have. Mr. Harland, you've already given me a bonus. Not money, man. A real, tangible token of my appreciation. Hennessy. Your butler bot? He nods. But you've got no other servants up here. Who's going to take care of you? I've got other, less advanced machines to help me. Plus, I've got Yvonne. I know it may sound strange, but she impressed me through all this. She kept to herself mostly, but she managed to keep an astoundingly level head. Never thought I'd be able to say as much about such an excitable, dramatic child. Perhaps, if she continues to prove herself, she could become trusted to take over after all. At this, I can't contain my smile. But Hennessy? Really? I don't have any use for. You're taking him, Jack, and that's final, Rutherford cuts in. Do with him what you want. Wipe his memory and flip him for a profit, for all I care. Toss him to the scrap heap. Just get him out of here. Ah, now I see. That's extremely generous of you, sir, I say. Well, I owe you an awful lot, he says. If you ever need a favor, or if you're just in the neighborhood and feel like keeping an old man company, I extend my good hand. I'll be in touch, sir. He smiles and grips it gently. 34. Yvonne is in the library with an open book in her hands. The curtains are thrown wide, and light spills in, turning the dark and dreary library, I remember, into a spectacular altar to the sun. She wears an unassuming formal blouse and skirt, but it looks very unnatural on her, now that I've seen her in her true element. I have to lean heavily on my cane with every step as I enter the room. Yvonne shuts the book and crosses the library to meet me, skirt flowing behind her. Were you surprised by your gift? She says. I raise an eyebrow suspiciously. It was your idea, wasn't it? She stops in front of me, shrugging in a demure sort of way. I may have dropped this suggestion in passing. My father has soured a bit at the idea of having a bot around the house. Understandably. And given the constant abuse you seem to enjoy putting yourself through, you need someone looking after you. Or at least take care of you when you have one of those bad days. I think those sorts of bad days are behind me, I say. Still got too much work to do, you know? She smiles. Good. Still, a little extra help never hurt anyone. I can't always be there to pull your ass out of the fire. But if I ever need a ride... You've got my number. I smile. You know, the real Yvonne is all right. Without her, I'd really be up a creek right now. Well, frankly, Mrs. Reed, it's been a long time since I had a friend.
Me too.
Maybe if I wasn't so old and broken, maybe. Well, a beautiful, intelligent woman like you can't blame a guy for wondering what could have been. If only we'd met in another lifetime. She walks closer, stands on her tiptoes, and kisses my cheek. When her lips leave me, she tilts her head, whispering into my ear.
The if-onlys will drive you crazy if you let them.
I close my eyes. They're still closed as I listen to her footfalls drifting slowly away across the library.
Sir.
I open my eyes and turn. Hennessy is waiting in the doorway, my coat and hat in his hands. I take them and put them on. Turning back toward the library, I find Yvonne watching me. I tip my hat to her. Thank you for a lovely evening. She smiles. I leave with Hennessy following me down the hallway. You get everything taken care of? I ask.
Yes, sir,
Hennessy says.
The ownership of one Intertech personal service bot has been transferred in title from the party of Rutherford Holland to the party of Jack Tarelli. Now reporting for duty, Intertech personal service bot Housekeeper Series, model number 07111. Call letters HNSC, serial number...
HNSC, I say. HNSC. Oh, I get it.
If you would prefer a different name...
Nah, I kinda like it. As we exit through the big doors with the word Harland across the front, I casually slip my hand inside my coat and rest it in the new Axlug 44 in my chest holster, watching Hennessy carefully. I wait until the doors have rolled shut behind us to ask him the question I've wanted to ask for days. It was you, wasn't it?
Pardon me, sir?
Hennessy says, and if he were human, I'd say he was faking innocence. Nathan wasn't stupid, I say. He managed to pull the wool over Rutherford's eyes and hide all his dirty business deals. He probably had no idea what he was walking into when he went down to the factory on 105th that night. But he certainly wasn't dumb enough to go anywhere in a neighborhood like East Amber alone. Still, he couldn't risk anyone finding out about his secret dealings. He needed backup. Backup that wouldn't talk. I shrug. If it were me, I'd bring the butler bot. I'm leaning on my cane with the elbow of my bad arm. It hurts, but it gives me the freedom to use my free hand under my jacket to slip the 44 from its holster and caress the trigger guard with my fingertip. Hennessy hasn't so much as moved a synthetic muscle since I began speaking. Correct me if I'm wrong, I say, but I believe a change of ownership means you are now obligated to answer all my queries to the best of your knowledge. First question, are you now, or have you ever been, operating under the orders of the Blue Wreath Syndicate?
No, sir,
he says immediately. I tighten my grip on the 44. Next question. What were you doing with Nathan Harland on the night he died, and why didn't you tell Rutherford what happened to him? This time, it takes a moment for Hennessy to answer.
Had Rutherford Harland asked me directly, I would have been obligated to tell him everything I knew,
says Hennessy.
However, I was also specifically commanded by Nathan Harland to tell no one where we went that night, especially his father, out of concern for his safety.
Rutherford is your owner, I say. Why would you take orders from Nathan?
My primary function under Rutherford Harland's employ was expressed as the protection of the Harland family. When Nathan asked me to accompany him that night based on an expressed concern for his safety, to refuse would have been against that function.
And Rutherford wasn't suspicious that you left the tower?
It was early evening, and I am usually tending to cleaning duties during that time. Rutherford rarely calls on me during those hours.
Okay. So what exactly happened?
Nathan Harland commanded me to accompany him to a business meeting as his personal bodyguard. I used the family vehicle to fly Nathan to the specified address, a condemned factory in East Amber. He asked me to wait in the vehicle and watch the street for anything suspicious while he stepped inside. I now suspect he was doing something he did not want me to know about. Nathan entered the factory, and I waited, as ordered. Several minutes passed. I saw no one emerge from the factory during that time. I finally decided to forego Nathan's orders, suspecting something had gone wrong. I entered the facility. Inside the factory, my bioscanners indicated that Nathan was under a pile of large metal objects stacked on top of one another. All his vital signs had ceased. I rang the authorities to tell them where they could find Nathan Harlan's body, without giving them my name, of course, and I drove home. Nathan had told me, prior to all this, that I was, under no circumstances, to tell anyone anything about it, neither where we were going that night, nor that we had gone anywhere at all. As I had previously indicated, I would have been obligated to break this command, had Rutherford asked me about it directly. But, as he did not—
"You don't think," I interrupted, "that under the circumstances, keeping all this information from Rutherford was unwise?" Hennessy crosses his arms behind his back. He sighs, which is almost funny, given that he has no lungs. Amazing the lengths they'll go to make these things seem real. Someone ought to tell them to dial it back a bit.
"I am aware of a phenomenon that humans call hindsight," says Hennessy. "In hindsight, my primary function could have been better performed had I disobeyed Nathan Harlan's last orders. I certainly would have done this had I been privy to knowledge of his illicit activity with the Blue Wreath's crime syndicate, as this would have rendered 100% of his orders null and void. But, may I remind you, I am a machine. A machine's outputs are governed exclusively by its inputs. I was acting under the impression that I was following perfectly legal and ethical orders that were simply beyond the comprehension of one in such a lowly position as me. I see now that I made a terrible error in my reasoning, therefore endangering the Harlan family and miserably failing in my primary function. It occurs to me that I should be melted down. I can recommend several top-notch deconstruction facilities, sir."
"I don't think that'll be necessary," I say as I remove my hand from my jacket. "It's a bit of a runaround, but I guess I understand. You weren't the only one working with limited, inputs. In the end, it was your anonymous call that saved Rutherford's life, so, in a way, you did exactly what you were meant to do. You should feel good about that." He doesn't feel anything, of course, but the resulting grin on his synthetic face is well emulated.
"I do feel a little better, sir," he says.
"Bots. Let me save you the trouble of any future reasoning," I say. "Your only function is making sure I know everything you know, regardless of whether you think I need to know it or not. So you just talk until I tell you to shut up. All right, Hennessy?"
"Understood, sir," says Hennessy. "Would you like to include your personal defense and safety as part of my primary function?"
"Are you any good at that?"
"Oh, very good, sir."
"Better do that too, then. As far as it's within your power, make sure I stay alive, okay?" Hennessy bows a little.
"I hope I will perform admirably, sir."
"You and me both, pal." My datapad buzzes in my coat pocket. It's a smaller, slightly more powerful model than my old datapad, the one Wilmer shot in half. I've barely used it yet. I'm getting an incoming call from an unlisted number. "Yeah?" I answer.
My, Jack,"
says the voice on the other end.
"It sounds like you've been busy."
"Fox, I thought so. Busier than I'd like," I say. "How about you?"
"Oh, I never take a day off, but I'm extra busy today. A lot of my clients want to know the inside story about the assassination attempt on Rutherford Harlan. I'd kind of like to hear the full story myself."
"That why you called? To purchase the serial rights?"
"Nah, I've actually got a piece of information I thought you needed to hear. You can just owe me, all right?"
"Fine."
"A few of my contacts inform me that the Blue Wreath Syndicate just posted an illegal underground bounty on the head of Jack the Knife Tarelli for 25,000 creds. Last known location, East Amber. Wanted dead or alive."
"Took them long enough," I say.
"Ain't exactly chump change. You might want to plan accordingly."
I chuckle a bit. "You want to hear my idea of a plan? The other day, I decapitated a bot with an assault knife in my bare hands. And if you tell your clients anything about Jack the Knife, I'll do the same to you, Fox. And that is a solemn promise." There was a pause on the other end. followed by a throat-clearing sound.
You really are embracing that old nickname, aren't you? Says Fox.
What can I say? It's grown on me. And one other thing, while I've got you. I need some information. Everything you can find on the name Tacitus Nash.
I'll look into it, says Fox. Talk to you later, buddy. Keep your head down.
Keep yours down too, buddy. I hang up. I turn to Hennessy and shrug. He's a good kid. Just needs to be reminded who's boss sometimes.
I see, says Hennessy. And this Mr. Nash, someone you know, sir?
The elevator doors roll open. I hand Hennessy my cane and step out without it. Not yet, I say. We'll soon change that. The end. Jack the Knife returns in A Knife in the Dark, Alloy Heart. Books by Corey McCullough. The Fallen Tetralogy. The Fallen Odyssey, a parallel universe fantasy novel. The Fallen Aeneid, Book 2 of the Fallen Odyssey. Shadows of the Fallen, Book 3 of the Fallen Odyssey, coming soon. The Fallen Anabasis, Book 4 of the Fallen Odyssey, coming soon. Rogues Galaxy series, A Knife in the Dark, a science fiction noir thriller. A Knife in the Dark, Alloy Heart. 6-shooter, coming soon. About the author. Corey McCullough is an independent copy editor, proofreader, ghostwriter, and author. He lives in western Pennsylvania with his amazing wife Vanessa and their 2 beautiful daughters. His favorite pastimes are reading, writing, playing video games, spending time with his best friend, Vanessa, and most of all, being a dad. Text Corey at 814-499-1311. Yes, this is a real number. No, it's not a promotional thing. He just wants to know what you think of his book. This has been A Knife in the Dark, a science fiction noir thriller. Written by Corey McCullough. Narrated by Michael Beckett. Copyright 2014, 2018 by Corey McCullough. Production copyright by Corey McCullough.